Welcome to Eye on America. I'm Michelle Miller. Today we visit communities where residents are overcoming personal and circumstantial challenges. In Texas, we see how tiny home neighborhoods are providing stable housing to formerly homeless people. And in New York, we tour a museum highlighting the stories and contributions of immigrants and Black Americans at the turn of the 20th century. But we begin in Paradise, California, to revisit the deadliest wildfire in the state's history, known as the 2018 Camp Fire. Jonathan Vigliotti speaks with residents to see how they're still rebuilding years later.
95% of Paradise surrendered to flame in the 2018 Camp Fire. The once lush landscape covered in pine trees stripped bare. But from the ashes, a new breed of American pioneer was born.
Hi, oh my God. It's so good to see you.
Kylie Warble and her daughter Ellie were one of the first families to return.
A lot of people don't want to come back here. I had to stay here.
We first met the Warbles back in 2019, 6 months after the firestorm destroyed everything. They barely escaped with their lives.
Why are you crying?
Because it's so sad.
What's sad?
We're talking about everything that happened to us.
Between then and now, how has life for both of you changed?
Even though we lost everything in the fire, it's nice to have something new.
You heal every single day. It's nice to get back in our hometown because then you get a fresh start on life.
And thousands of people have come back for a fresh start. In fact, Paradise was the fastest growing city in California for the past 4 years.
Is it a crazy idea to move back to a community that has been decimated by wildfire?
You know, it's not a crazy idea. And people who do decide to rebuild in a place like Paradise, they're often even safer than they were before the fire because that place has already been burned.
Jennifer Gray Thompson is founder of After the Fire, a nonprofit that helps people decide if they should rebuild.
Well, people do live in the woods now because it's naturally occurring affordable housing often. So when we tell people don't live in the woods anymore, I say, let's actually help the people now who are not fire affected to actually remain, in place.
Today, fire threatens nearly 40% of all homes here in California. Well-intentioned firefighters were first trained to put out wildfires beginning in the early 1900s to protect a growing population. But all of that dead vegetation left behind, worsened by drought, led to a fuel source that, if sparked, can now be explosive.
In Paradise, efforts are focused on protecting against future fires. All power lines will be buried underground, and all residents must also remove vegetation too close to their homes. Federal grants are offered to homeowners who use fire-resistant materials to build their homes.
Do you feel like the new Paradise is more resilient if there was a wildfire nearby?
Yes, I do. The likelihood of seeing another wildfire in Paradise, it already devastated our whole community.
Not everyone agrees enough to return. While Paradise has seen record growth, the current population is only a third of what it was before the fire.
Paradise is a microcosm of just broader issues that our nation's going to have to grapple with more.
Researcher Ryan Miller is tracking our nation's growing climate migration and the conflict it's causing.
I'm hoping with some of the work we understand from Paradise, we can get ahead of some of those issues and prevent those disasters from happening later down the road.
But for Miller, this issue isn't just academic, it's deeply personal.
This was before we even got back to the house.
We continue with part 2 of our look at Paradise, California in the aftermath of the devastating 2018 fire. Jonathan Vigliotti meets with former residents who chose not to rebuild in the town, but are still experiencing extreme weather in their new homes.
Oh, look at that, boy. Look at that, look at that. Images like this show how extreme weather ravages main streets across America. In the last 5 years, at least 5 towns in 4 states have been nearly erased from the map. All of them after Paradise, California fell.
So at first I thought we were just gonna, evacuate maybe for a day or two and then come back home.
Justin Miller's childhood home in Paradise was destroyed. He's one of the many who chose not to return, now making his home in nearby Oroville.
Was there ever a thought in your mind of staying in Paradise, of returning?
At first, we were thinking, after the lot was cleared off, we could rebuild there, but, then we realized the town would take a while to rebuild, so it would just be easier to move to someplace like here in Oroville.
Just last year, extreme weather forced 2.5 million Americans from their homes. And new research finds nearly half of all American homes are threatened by climate change.
Paradise was that place in the 90s for my family where they could afford their own small house.
Justin's older brother, Ryan, a PhD candidate in geography, is now studying this climate migration.
This is research that is deeply personal for you.
Yeah. Why were we in a situation where the affordable place was also the place that had this huge hazard?
Ryan and his team used postal records to track where people moved.
We think this covers about 2/3 of all the households in Paradise.
What he found in many cases, a move didn't solve the problem. It put people back in harm's way.
I'm seeing a lot of households moved into areas that are also threatened by other kinds of disasters.
Well,
here in Florida, you have hurricanes, Tennessee, Kentucky, you have tornadoes. What does that say to you?
Maybe we're in a situation where increasingly people are finding that in their search for affordable housing, they sort of have to live in an area that's exposed to one of these climate-driven hazards. We're going to see more potential paradises happening where we have these communities exposed to this threat that the community might not be prepared to face.
All right.
Paradise residents Kylie and Ellie Warble largely picked up the pieces on their own, including removing dead trees and vegetation from their property as they applied for and waited to receive federal aid.
Has the meaning of home changed for you?
Yes, a lot.
Home for me was kind of like a place we live in, but home will always be wherever my mom is.
Paradise families have scattered, the fabric of this small town frayed.
In Jesus' name, amen.
But don't tell that to the Warbles, pioneers of a new American community they hope is resilient to climate-fueled storms.
Coming up, we'll show you an inventive and community-forward idea to help the unhoused. This is Eye on America. Welcome back. Homelessness rate rose 12% from 2022 to 2023, according to recent government data. Tiny homes can sometimes offer a more affordable and permanent solution for individuals dealing with chronic homelessness. Janet Shanlian takes us inside a village in Austin, Texas, that's designed specifically to promote community and keep people off the streets.
From the air, this could be any master-planned community. But with few exceptions, everyone living in these tiny homes, like 72-year-old Michael Walker, has a story of hardship.
I was in a coma for 7 months.
And used to be homeless.
It is an extraordinarily vulnerable, broken, despised, outcast, lost and forgotten population of people.
Alan Graham was handing out sack lunches as part of the Mobile Loaves and Fishes ministry when the then real estate developer came up with the idea.
Hey, bro. How you doing, man?
Good, I'm blessed. How about
All
yourself?
good? Blessed?
Okay.
Same thing.
All right, get some.
10 years in, there are more than 500 homes in the Community First Village, with land and plans for 1,400 more.
How is yours a different approach to homelessness?
It's 100% relational and not transactional. We're never going to fix homelessness by providing houses to people. Housing is important, it's necessary, but it's completely insufficient to what human beings need.
Graham says that need is connection. Created here through social gatherings and responsibility.
This is my living room, and this is my mantle.
Blair Racine, like every resident, pays rent, averaging just under $400 a month. Some work jobs here to meet that commitment, like in the community garden.
Isn't that beautiful? It kind of makes you want to have a salad right now.
Most of the homes are 200 square feet, sharing bathrooms, shower facilities, and outdoor kitchens. There's an hourly bus into Austin, but the neighborhood has an on-site medical clinic, a market, recreational areas, and workspaces like this artist studio. Some residents sell online.
The selling's a big plus. But it's the joy. It's the joy of just getting your hands in the clay, getting your hands on the paint.
If you weren't here now, where would you be?
Well, still in my van.
This is the original kitchen #1.
More than 24 cities have replicated the model, Graham says, and he acknowledges it's not perfect.
Come around the corner, first class commercial equipment.
But good enough that he and his wife left their neighborhood to help foster this one. Now themselves living in 400 square feet.
What people need is a home and a place that cares for them. You build it, I will promise you they will come.
Tiny homes, but a big idea.
We travel now to South Florida, where local wildlife habitats are being disrupted by the state's ever-growing human population. Christiane Benavides introduces us to an organization working to bring balance between animal and man.
We really need to make sure that he can paddle appropriately with both feet.
At the Pelican Harbor Seabird Station in Miami, Renata Schneider is the emergency veterinarian on duty.
We're doing surgeries, we're doing EKG monitoring on our patients, we're using appropriate pain medications, we're cautiously using antibiotics.
Founded in 1980, the Seabird Station functions as an ER for local wildlife.
Is it an injured animal?
Lately, it's gotten busier.
We had our highest numbers in 2020, 2021. This year has been a very busy year. I don't know if we're going to break those numbers.
Staff here says South Florida has an invasive species problem, a growing human population that presents challenges to the native animals. Yaritza Acosta is in charge of rehabilitation. She's worked here for 12 years.
With more people, more buildings going up, we see a lot more hit by cars or birds flying into windows or buildings.
Then there's the seabirds with fish hook line injuries or that have swallowed plastic waste.
The pelicans in this cage have life-altering injuries, including this guy, that makes them ineligible for release. So the harbor station cares for them. Hey, buddy.
They become permanent residents at the Wildlife Center, so-called ambassadors, a public face to the Seabird Station during what Schneider says is a critical time.
South Florida is in trouble right now. We keep building, we keep destroying habitat. Without our work, how are these pelicans and gulls supposed to continue to thrive?
For most of the birds that get treated, this is the goal. After 55 days of treatment for botulism and an eye infection, this brown pelican was successfully released back into the wild.
Some people will make the argument, well, they would just die and leave them be in the wild. However, we don't buy into that. Most of the injuries that we see are caused by us. We have to correct the balance.
A balancing act to help us coexist responsibly with native wildlife.
Ahead, we step into a time capsule telling some of the untold stories of America's past. That story is next. We close our show with a look back in time. The Tenement Museum in New York pays tribute to the immigrants and working class citizens of the late 19th and early 20th centuries. I recently toured a new exhibit at the museum showcasing the Black residents who lived alongside immigrants in Lower Manhattan, all seeking their American dream. So this was an actual tenement.
This building, was a tenement from 1863 to 1935. People lived here.
Just imagine. Oh, these are narrow. Stepping back in time.
There was no light in this hallway originally.
Seeing how the other half lived a century and a half ago.
And there are 20 families that live in the building.
People struggling to eke out an existence in cramped quarters with poor ventilation and no indoor plumbing.
Between 1940 and 1960, over 1 million Puerto Ricans coming to New York.
For 35 years, New York's Tenement Museum has tried to preserve the history of the immigrant. Poor, anonymous, newly minted citizens searching for a better life, often serving the needs of Manhattan's rich and famous.
Here we see Joseph P. Moore.
Kat Lloyd is curator.
He's a waiter. He was an Irish immigrant who lived in this building, 97 Orchard Street.
Since its founding, only those who actually lived in this building, like the Irish Joseph Moore, were given the museum treatment until patrons noticed something else.
Visitors looking at this record started to ask, about the Joseph Moore listed directly above and ask questions about the racial designation that we see next to his name, people wanted to know, right, what were the experiences of Irish immigrants and Black New Yorkers?
Those questions sparked a new exhibit on that other Joseph Moore, one that Mellon graduate fellow Marquise Taylor was hired to investigate.
So Joseph Moore was an African-American man that was born in Belvedere, New Jersey in 1838, and he decided to come to New York in 1857. And he was a man who worked as a waiter. He also worked as a coachman because work for Black men during that time was seasonal. And he decided to establish a home at 17 Lawrence Street with his wife, Rachel Moore.
But the Moores, who were Catholic too, weren't the only Black people living in tenements in Lower Manhattan back then.
In the process of research, we looked at our own archive, and that's when we found the letter from Jean Emanuel.
Jean Emanuel wrote that letter as a concerned citizen in 1988, the year the museum opened.
She talked about her family's history, that her family had lived in Lower Manhattan, that they had worked on the South Street Seaport. And so she asked the museum when we were founding it to please include the stories of Black New Yorkers, particularly living in tenement apartments in Lower Manhattan.
3 decades later, there are mementos from Manuel's family.
These are all objects that belonged to her great-grandmother, Parthenia Lawrence, who was a Black New Yorker, lived in tenements in the 1860s.
These are tiny little books. Items that conjure the personal lives of those who once possessed them.
Maybe most important is this object in the center here, this book of Abraham Lincoln's speeches. And to think about a book of Abraham Lincoln's speeches being read in a tenement home, that's so different than how we tend to learn about the Civil War. We wanted to know what were the conversations among free Black New Yorkers in the 1860s as these changes in the nation were taking place.
It turns out that Jean Emanuel's ancestors and the Moores were actually neighbors.
Front building and back building of the same exact address in 1870. And so almost certainly they knew each other, would have seen each other in the courtyard, and that really inspired us to dig into this neighborhood further.
It led them to Moore's long-lost relative.
Nothing ever pinpointed to New York City until I went to the Tenement Museum, and once they showed me all of their research, it kind of like started all clicking.
Ashley Pinkowski had been hitting dead ends while tracing her family tree.
This was not passed down to our family. This is all things that I really had to find out on my own.
She suspects work was the primary motive for the move to the Big Apple. Taylor says clues suggest another motive.
We had discovered a newspaper article that talked about a Black man who had lived in New Jersey, the same community as Joseph Moore. This is at the same time that the fugitive slave law had been in effect, which basically incentivized, right, an entire market of recapturing people and bringing them further back south.
Joseph Moore holds an even deeper connection for Taylor.
I actually went to high school just 2 blocks north of 17 Lawrence Street. When I was in high school, I actually went to the Tenement Museum and I took a tour, and I actually thought that African American history didn't have a place in the Lower Manhattan.
The place the Moores called home has been recreated inside the museum.
An article mentioned that he had a portrait of Abraham Lincoln on his wall. And so we have a portrait of Abraham Lincoln on the mantle.
A 2-room flat that the census shows was occupied by the couple, their daughter, and 2 other people.
An Irish woman named Rose Brown, and then Rose's 14-year-old son, Louis, who is one of the many New Yorkers who has a Black father and an Irish immigrant mother. So they probably sleep in the kitchen space, actually, right? They would have mattresses here in the closet that they would pull out at night.
Oftentimes you have in 19th century New York City African Americans and Irish people living alongside one another. Both groups were sort of deemed undesirable to people who were often leasing and renting properties. You have to understand that they are also competing usually for jobs, for housing, so that creates some sort of tension as well.
Tension that by 1863 led to the violence and terror of the Civil War draft riots. 25% of the Black population fled Lower Manhattan to other parts of the city.
This article talks about a white proprietor in Lower Manhattan who actually laid off his Black staff, right, because of the fear of mob violence during this time.
It's a fuller picture of a time nearly erased by the physical progress of a new century, a history now open to everyone.
And that's what I love about the museum, is that visitors asking questions inspires us, right? We do new research, we create new tours, and that it's this dynamic that keeps things really fresh.
For more stories like these and live coverage of breaking news, stream us right here on CBS News 24/7. I'm Michelle Miller. Thank you for watching Eye on America.